The snow began before sunset, light and gentle at first, like a secret trying to find its voice. By the time darkness fell, the world had turned white and silent, and the path that had once been a road was now only a memory beneath our boots. We moved slowly, 8 of us at first, then 6, then 4. The rest had turned back or disappeared somewhere behind us, swallowed by the storm or their own fear. I couldn't blame them. Every step forward felt like a bet with God. I carried my child inside me, close to the end. Each movement sent a knife of pain through my back, but I kept walking because stopping meant dying. The others didn't speak much anymore. Breath was too precious. We were a small blur of shadows moving across a white field, toward a line that wasn't visible but could get you shot if you crossed it. The border, they called it. To me, it was just another road to survival. I remember the crunch of the snow under my boots. I remember how it didn't sound like snow should. It sounded like glass breaking. Every sound carried too far in the cold air. Every heartbeat felt like a confession. "Almost there," said one of the men ahead of me. His name was Danilo, a farmer with kind eyes and broken hands. He had been guiding us for 2 days. He said he knew the way, that his cousin had crossed this route the winter before. I didn't know if that was true. I didn't ask. People lie about hope all the time. It's how they survive. "Keep close," he said again, turning back briefly. We follow the lights. The lights were faint, orange glows in the distance, flickering like dying stars. Beyond them was supposed to be safety, or at least not death. I thought about that word as I walked. Safety. It didn't mean what it used to. Once, it meant walls and warmth, a husband's hand, a roof that didn't shake when planes passed overhead. Now it meant anything that let you wake up the next morning still breathing. My daughter kicked inside me, as if to remind me she was listening. I pressed my hand to my belly and whispered, "Hold on, little one, just a little longer." The wind picked up. It came from the east, sharp and angry, cutting through the layers of my coat. The others pulled their scarves tighter. I didn't. I needed air. I needed to feel something that wasn't fear. We passed the ruins of a house half buried in snow. The roof had collapsed, the chimney still standing like a gravestone. Danilo stopped and looked around. "We'll rest here for a moment," he said. "Then we move." I sat on what used to be a doorstep and tried to breathe through the pain in my ribs. The baby shifted again. My breath caught. "Are you all right?" asked a young woman beside me. Her name was Oksana, I think. She couldn't have been more than 20. Her eyelashes were clumped with frost, her face raw from the cold. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just tired." She nodded, but she knew. Everyone knew. I had been slowing them down for hours. The truth was, I could feel it starting. The pain that came like a tide, then left me dizzy and trembling. The contractions had begun hours ago, but I had pretended they were just cramps, just another way the cold punished the body. Now they came sharper, deeper, like something tearing me open from the inside. I didn't tell anyone. What good would it do? We were too close to turn back, too far to get help. I had promised myself my child would be born free, even if that meant she was born in the middle of nowhere. 5 more kilometers, Danilo said. "We cross before dawn." 5 kilometers. It might as well have been 5 lifetimes. We started walking again, the snow now waist-deep in some places. The storm had thickened, swallowing the world. I couldn't see where the sky ended and the earth began. My breath came in short bursts. My fingers had gone numb. My feet, too. The cold didn't hurt anymore. It was past hurting. It was a silence, spreading slowly through the body. The contractions came closer together. I bit my tongue to keep from crying out. The metallic taste of blood mixed with the air that felt like ice in my lungs. When the pain eased for a moment, I looked up. Ahead of us, faintly through the curtain of white, I saw the flash of headlights. "Down!" Danilo hissed. We dropped into the snow. My heart pounded. The light swept across the field, bright and merciless, cutting through the night like a blade. Somewhere nearby, a voice shouted in a language I didn't understand. Then another. "Guards!" Danilo cursed under his breath. "Stay still," he whispered. "If they see us." But he didn't finish. The engine of the vehicle roared closer. The light grew stronger. Panic spread through the group like fire. One of the men ran. "Idiot!" Danilo hissed. The lights followed him. A shout, a gunshot cracked through the night, echoing off the frozen trees. The sound didn't stop. It echoed inside my skull, bouncing off every memory of loss I'd tried to bury. Oksana grabbed my arm. "Run!" she said. I couldn't. My legs were shaking, the pain in my belly twisting tighter. "Go," I told her. "Go!" She hesitated. Another gunshot. Then she ran. I was alone. The lights moved further away, chasing the others. I lay there in the snow, trying to breathe, trying not to scream. My vision blurred. The cold was no longer an enemy. It was a lullaby. It wanted me to sleep. But then the pain came again, stronger, unstoppable. My whole body arched, and I knew. It was time. I crawled toward the ruins of the house we'd passed earlier. Each movement felt like dragging a mountain. My hands bled where the ice cut through my gloves. I reached the doorway, collapsed inside, and pulled the remnants of a wooden door against the wind. It wasn't much, but it kept the snow from burying me completely. I laid on my back, breathing hard. My breath came out in clouds. I stared at the broken ceiling, at the snowflakes drifting through the cracks, glowing faintly in the moonlight. "Not here," I whispered. "Please, not here." But the body doesn't listen to prayers. It knows its own timing. The next contraction hit like lightning. I cried out, the sound swallowed by the wind. The pain was beyond anything I'd ever known. Raw, primal, ancient. I tried to remember what the nurse had told me back home, before the bombs fell, before the hospitals turned to rubble. Breathe. Push. Don't fight it. So I did. I pushed, again and again, until the world went white, not from snow, but from the light behind my eyes. I screamed into the storm, and for a moment, I thought the earth screamed with me. Then, through the thunder of my heartbeat, I heard it. A cry. Small, thin, perfect. I pulled the baby into my arms. She was red and slippery and alive. My hands shook as I tore a strip from my coat and wrapped her in it. Her skin was warm against mine, her heartbeat fast and steady. "It's okay," I whispered, tears freezing on my cheeks. "You're here. You made it." She quieted at my voice. I looked down at her tiny face, her dark hair already wet with melting snow. Her eyes were closed, but her mouth moved as if trying to find me. I pressed my lips to her forehead. "You're free," I whispered. "You're free." The wind howled louder, shaking the walls. I held her tighter. I needed to find shelter, fire, anything, but my body wouldn't move. I had lost too much blood. My hands were trembling so violently I could barely hold her. I looked toward the gap in the wall. The lights were gone now, just darkness and snow. I didn't know if the others had made it. I didn't know if I would. I leaned back, closing my eyes. My baby stirred, her cry fading to a whimper. I felt her heartbeat under my palm. "Don't stop," I murmured. "Please don't stop." But the world was slipping away. The last thing I remember before the darkness took me was the sound of footsteps crunching in the snow, steady, heavy, human. Voices shouting faintly, a flashlight cutting through the doorway. Then nothing. When I woke, it was still dark, but the wind had stopped. My body ached, every muscle screaming, but I was warm, wrapped in something heavy. I tried to move, but a voice stopped me. "Don't," it said quietly. "You're safe." A man was kneeling beside me, a uniform. The light of a lantern flickered across his face. He wasn't one of ours. My breath caught. I tried to reach for my baby. "Where?" He lifted a small bundle from beside the fire. "She's fine," he said. "She's strong." The baby's soft cry filled the silence. The man looked at me for a long moment. His expression was strange. Not pity, not judgment. Something else. Something human. "You should be dead," he said quietly. I managed a weak smile. Maybe I was. Until she called me back. He looked down at the baby, then back at me. His eyes softened. "We couldn't leave you here," he said. "We left before. We shouldn't have." "You came back," I whispered. "Yes," he said. "We came back." And there, in the ruins of a forgotten house at the edge of a border no one could see, I realized that sometimes salvation doesn't come from heaven. It comes from the sound of boots returning through the snow. I closed my eyes, the warmth of the fire flickering against my face, and held my daughter close. The storm raged outside, but for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid. Because someone had turned around, and that was enough. When I woke again, the world was still white, but softer, like the snow itself had fallen asleep. The roof above me was not the collapsed one I remembered, but wood, patched clumsily with blankets. My skin prickled from warmth, not cold. Somewhere near me something hissed and crackled. It took me a moment to understand. A fire. I blinked, disoriented. My body felt heavy, drained, as if someone had taken me apart and put me back together wrong. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and damp wool. Then I heard her, my daughter. Her tiny cry sliced through the quiet, weak but alive. I turned my head too fast. Pain shot down my neck. "My baby—" "She's fine," said a man's voice. The words were calm, almost gentle. A figure moved in the dim light, crouched near the fire. When he turned, the glow caught his face. The border guard. The one who had found me. His uniform jacket was gone. He wore a wool sweater and gloves that had lost their color from wear. He held my daughter close to the flames, wrapped in layers of torn blankets. The light painted his face in orange and gold. "Where are we?" I whispered. "An outpost," he said, glancing up at me. "Abandoned since autumn. It's not safe to move you yet." My mouth was dry. "The others?" He hesitated. "Gone." The word fell between us like a stone. I looked at my daughter. "And you?" "You came back." He nodded once, almost as if ashamed. "We heard crying." He didn't say the baby's cry. He said crying, as if he hadn't known which of us was calling for help. I tried to push myself up. My arms trembled. The blanket slipped from my shoulders. I was still wearing my torn coat, crusted with ice and blood. My body shook violently. He stood quickly, setting the baby down near the fire in a makeshift basket, an old ammunition crate lined with rags. Then he knelt beside me. "Stop," he said firmly. "You'll tear your stitches." My head snapped up. "You stitched me?" "I had to," he said quietly. "You lost a lot of blood." "My partner helped," I blinked. "Your partner?" As if on cue, another figure appeared from the doorway. Older, broader, with a gray beard stiff from frost. His uniform coat was still buttoned up to his neck. His expression was colder than the wind outside. "Pyotr?" the younger man said. "She's awake." Pyotr's eyes flicked toward me, then to the baby. "You shouldn't have brought them here," he said flatly. "We couldn't leave them." The first man, Marco, I remembered now from the badge on his coat, replied, "You broke orders." Marco didn't answer. Pyotr crossed the room, grabbed a kettle from the fire, and poured hot water into a tin mug. The steam rose between us like a curtain. "Drink," he said, holding it out to me. I hesitated. "If we wanted you dead," Pyotr said, "we wouldn't have built a fire." I took the mug, my fingers trembling around it. The heat burned my palms in a way that made me want to weep. I drank slowly. The water tasted of smoke and iron, but it was life itself. "You should eat," Marco said, nodding to a piece of bread on the table. "We don't have much, but I can't," I said, my voice shaking. He studied me. "You need to. For her." He didn't have to say more. I tore a piece off and forced myself to chew. For a while, none of us spoke. The fire popped softly. The baby made small sounds, sighs between breaths. Finally, I asked, "What will happen now?" Marco looked into the flames. "We'll figure that out," Piotr snorted. "We?" Marco ignored him. I stared at them both. "Will you send us back?" Silence. Then Marco said, "That depends. On what?" "Whether the others find out you're here." The fire crackled louder, filling the space between words. Later, when the wind picked up again, Piotr went outside to check the perimeter. Marco stayed near the fire. He was cleaning his rifle, though it seemed more like a habit than necessity. His movements were slow, methodical, almost distracted. "Why did you return?" I asked quietly. He didn't look up. "You wouldn't have made it through the night." "That's not what I asked." He hesitated, then sighed. "We're trained to listen, to know what silence means, what doesn't." The storm was dying. I heard something. A cry. It didn't stop. "I thought—" He shook his head. "I thought maybe it was an animal, or maybe my conscience. And you came back anyway?" His mouth curved, but it wasn't a smile. "I came back because I couldn't stand the sound of it." He glanced at the baby, then away again. "I thought you'd be dead. When we saw you moving, I almost shot. My hand—" It shook. "You didn't." "No," he said. "I didn't." When Piotr returned, his boots tracked snow across the floor. "No sign of patrols," he said. "But they'll send someone by noon." "We can't stay long," Marco nodded. "Then we move at dawn." "Move?" I said, startled. "Where?" "North," Marco said. "There's a clinic in the village past the river. They treat anyone who arrives breathing," Piotr scoffed. "You'll lose your rank for this." Marco looked up sharply. "Then I lose it." Piotr stared at him for a long time. "You have a family, Marco, a wife." "A son," Marco flinched just slightly, but I saw it. "I had a wife," he said softly. "And we had a child." The silence that followed was different this time, heavier, but not cruel. Piotr looked at me. "You're not the first refugee to come through here," he said. "Most don't make it." "You're lucky." "Lucky." I almost laughed. He turned back to the fire. "If anyone asks, we never found you." Marco nodded. "Agreed." When the men finally rested, I sat awake beside the fire, holding my daughter. Her breathing was shallow but steady. I studied her face, memorizing every detail, the tiny lashes, the curve of her mouth, the small scar near her eyebrow from where the cold had kissed her too long. I thought of the people who hadn't made it. Danilo, Oksana, the others. The snow outside was their grave now. Marco stirred in his sleep, muttering softly. His face looked different without its hardness, almost boyish, tired. I wondered what kind of man risks everything for a stranger, maybe one who's already lost too much. I whispered to my daughter, "We owe him everything, my love. But we must not stay, because kindness is fragile in a world that punishes it. And men like Marco don't stay lucky for long." At dawn, the wind returned. The fire had burned down to embers. Piotr packed supplies, bread, 2 canteens, a map. Marco helped me to my feet, his hand steady against my elbow. "Can you walk?" he asked. "I'll try." The moment I stepped outside, the cold hit like a wall. The sky was pale gray, the horizon blurred. The snow stretched endlessly in every direction. I held my daughter under my coat, her warmth pressed against my chest. Marco adjusted his rifle strap. "Stay close." Piotr led the way, muttering about orders and madness. We walked for hours. The landscape was a ghost. Trees frozen mid-breath, rivers turned to mirrors. My legs felt like stone. Every step sent pain up my spine, but I kept going, for her. For the promise of something better. When we reached the river, Marco stopped. "We rest here." Piotr scanned the distance. If they catch us, they won't, Marco said, but I could hear it too, the faint growl of an engine carried by the wind. Piotr's face went pale. They're coming, Marco turned to me. Hide her, now! I pulled my daughter tighter. What about you? He looked at me, eyes sharp with something like defiance. We'll delay them, no. He placed a hand on my shoulder. If they find you, they'll take her. If we can buy you 5 minutes, maybe you'll make it to the other side. Why? I demanded. Why do this for me? He hesitated, then said, because once someone did it for my wife, and I never got to thank them. He turned to Piotr. Go, take the ridge. Piotr swore under his breath but obeyed. Marco knelt beside me. Cross the river. There's a cabin on the hill. Wait until nightfall. Then follow the smoke. There'll be people who can help. I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. The sound of engines was louder now, closer. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small object. A wooden carving of a snowflake. My son made this, he said, pressing it into my palm. For luck. He doesn't need it anymore. I shook my head, tears freezing on my face. Please don't go, he said firmly. Now, I ran. The snow was deep, the river half frozen. My boots slipped on the ice. I could hear shouting behind me, the crack of rifles, the chaos of men running through snow. I clutched my daughter and stumbled forward. The water burned like fire when it touched my skin, but I didn't stop. On the other side, I collapsed in the snow, gasping. I looked back once, just once. Through the blinding white, I saw Marco standing on the riverbank, his rifle raised, shouting something I couldn't hear. A flash of movement, then the echo of a gunshot. I screamed, but the wind swallowed it. I crawled forward until I reached the trees. The world spun around me, the snowflake carving still in my hand. I pressed it to my lips and whispered, "Please let him live." Behind me, the sound of engines faded. The storm thickened again, hiding everything. That night, I found the cabin. The door was unlocked. Inside was a stove, a blanket, a single candle. I lit it and sat by the window, rocking my daughter. The snowflake carving rested on the table beside us. I didn't know if the guards had survived. I didn't know if the world beyond that river would be kinder. But I knew this. Somewhere in that endless white, Mercy had taken human form, and even if I never saw him again, I would remember the sound of his boots returning through the snow. I didn't sleep that night. Even after the fire burned down to embers and the cabin settled into its uneasy silence, I stayed awake, listening. The wind had softened outside, but my heart still pounded with the rhythm of running feet and faraway gunfire that might have been only memory. My daughter, my little miracle, slept against my chest, her small body radiating a warmth that no blanket could give. Every time she stirred, I tightened my hold, terrified that if I blinked, she might disappear, that this strange safety might melt like snow under sunlight. The candlelight flickered across the walls, showing the cracks in the wood, the frost curling along the window edges, the smell of smoke and melted wax mixed with the faint sweetness of her hair. It felt like I was the only person alive in the world. Then came the sound, distant at first, like the whisper of a tired bird. The crunch of boots in snow. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I reached for the poker by the stove, my hand trembling so badly I almost dropped it. The footsteps stopped just beyond the door. A long silence followed, then 3 soft knocks. My pulse thundered in my ears. "Nadia," a voice said quietly. "It's me!" I knew that voice. For a moment I couldn't move. I was afraid that if I opened the door I'd find only emptiness, that my mind, desperate for kindness, had conjured him. But then he spoke again, and the sound of my name in his mouth made my knees weak. "It's me. Marco." I set down the poker and opened the door. He stood there, snow clinging to his shoulders, his uniform torn, his face pale from the cold and exhaustion. A thin trail of dried blood ran down his temple. But he was alive, dear God, I whispered. He gave a faint smile. I told you I'd find you. For a moment, we just stared at each other. The snow swirled around him in the doorway, carried in by the wind, dusting the floor between us like ashes. I wanted to speak, but no words came. I only stepped aside. "Come in," I said finally. "Please." He hesitated, glancing toward the woods behind him as if expecting to be followed. Then he stepped inside, closing the door softly. The cold retreated as soon as the latch clicked. He removed his gloves slowly, as if every motion hurt. "Piotr?" I asked. He lowered his gaze. He didn't make it. My throat closed. I didn't know the older guard well, but I had seen the way Marco spoke to him, the quiet respect in his voice. I put a hand on his arm. "I'm sorry." He nodded, the word heavy in his silence. "Sit," I said, guiding him toward the small bench near the stove. "You're freezing," he didn't argue. When he sat, the wood creaked under his weight. I poured the last of the water from the kettle into a cup and handed it to him. His fingers brushed mine, still cold, still trembling. He took a sip, then leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. "They think we both died," he said finally. "Both?" He looked at me, a faint flicker of amusement or maybe disbelief in his tired eyes. "You and me. The report says the refugee mother froze crossing the river and the patrolman fell through the ice chasing her." "You lied." He shrugged, though there was nothing casual in it. "I rewrote the truth. Sometimes it's the same thing." I wanted to thank him, but the words felt too small. Instead, I asked, "Why did you come back?" He set the cup down, his hands clasping and unclasping like a man who no longer knew what to do with them. "Because I couldn't sleep," he said finally. "Because every time I closed my eyes, I heard your baby cry again. And because—" He stopped, shaking his head. "Because I needed to see that you made it." The silence stretched, filled only by the soft crackle of the fire. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. "I brought this," I frowned. "What is it?" He unwrapped it slowly, a small tin of condensed milk and a loaf of dark bread. My eyes stung instantly. "Marco." "It's not much," he said quickly. "But it'll help her?" I took it in both hands, pressing the tin to my heart. "You risked your life for this?" He met my gaze. "For her?" he said softly, nodding toward the baby. "Not for me." The flames flickered higher, painting gold across his face. He looked older in that light, older in something else. Gentle. "Does she have a name?" he asked after a while. I smiled faintly. "Yes, I named her Solomia. It means peace." He repeated it slowly, as if tasting the word. "Solomia, peace." He smiled faintly. "Then she's already changed the world a little." I didn't realize I was crying until a tear fell onto my hand. He saw it but didn't speak. Instead, he reached out and touched my shoulder lightly. A careful, hesitant gesture, the way someone touches something sacred. For the next few days, we stayed in that cabin. The storm had buried the world in silence again. He repaired the roof with planks scavenged from the shed. I boiled snow for water, fed Solomia small spoonfuls of milk. Marco spoke little, but when he did, his voice carried that strange calm of someone who had seen too much and still refused to become cruel. He told me about his village, about the orchard his father had tended before the war, about his wife Lena and the child they had lost. "She was 7 months pregnant," he said quietly one night, staring into the fire. "It was a winter like this. She slipped on the ice and—" He stopped, swallowing hard. I wasn't there. I reached across the table, placing my hand over his. His fingers were calloused, rough, but they didn't pull away. "I'm sorry," I said. He gave a small, hollow smile. "You shouldn't be. You remind me what courage looks like." Days blurred together. We didn't speak of what would come next. I knew he couldn't stay. He was a soldier. The uniform still called to him even if the meaning behind it had faded. And I was a refugee, a woman without papers, a ghost between borders. But inside that cabin, we were just two souls clinging to the small warmth the world had left us. At night, I would listen to Solomia breathing and Marco's footsteps outside as he checked the perimeter. He never complained, never asked for thanks. Only once did I hear his voice break. It was late, long after midnight. I woke to the sound of him muttering softly outside the door. At first I thought he was praying, but then I heard her name, Lena. I stepped to the doorway, the baby still in my arms. He didn't see me. He was standing under the faint light of the moon, head bowed, snow dusting his hair. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I couldn't save you, but maybe I can save someone." My heart ached at the sound. The next morning, I made him tea and pretended not to have heard. We sat in silence for a long time. Solomia cooed softly on the table between us, her tiny fingers reaching for the steam curling from his cup. He smiled down at her. "She likes the warmth." "She likes you," I said before I could stop myself. He looked up, surprised, then laughed softly. "I don't remember the last time someone said that." "You should hear it more often," I said. He studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said, "When this storm ends, I'll take you north. There's a center near the mountains. They help people like you. No one will ask questions there. And you? I'll go back. To your post?" He nodded slowly. Someone has to keep pretending the system still works. I wanted to tell him not to go, but I knew better. Men like him didn't belong to people. They belonged to conscience. "Still," I said quietly, "if you go back, they'll find out what you did." He smiled, tired but sure. "Then they'll have to look at themselves in the mirror." That night the storm broke. The sky cleared for the first time in weeks, revealing stars so bright they made the snow glow blue. I stood by the window, holding Solomia, watching the frost glitter like tiny shards of heaven scattered across the earth. Marco came to stand beside me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "She'll never remember this," he said softly. "But you will." "I'll tell her," I said, "when she's old enough to understand." He nodded, still looking out at the stars. "Tell her not everyone in uniform forgets they're human." I turned to him. "I'll tell her about the man who came back." He smiled faintly, then turned toward the door. "Get some sleep." We leave at first light, but I didn't sleep. I watched him sitting near the fire, head bowed, the glow flickering across his face. His rifle leaned against the wall, his coat drying on the chair. He looked so tired, like a man who'd been running all his life, not from danger, but from sorrow. And I realized something then. Survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about remembering why. When I finally closed my eyes, I whispered to the dark, "Thank you, Marco." Outside, the snow fell softly again, like the world was trying to erase its own cruelty. And for the first time since the war began, I dreamed not of running, but of returning. The morning we left the cabin, the air was so still it felt wrong. After days of howling wind and endless white noise, the silence carried weight, like something was waiting to happen. Marco stood outside with the map spread across the hood of an old Jeep that hadn't moved in years, its surface rimed with frost. The weak sun cast pale light over the trees, turning the snow into mirrors. He traced a path with his gloved finger. "If we move before noon, we can reach the checkpoint before nightfall," he said. "There's an abandoned rail line near the ridge. We'll follow it north." I nodded, though I barely understood what that meant anymore. All I knew was that the cabin could no longer protect us. The snow had melted just enough to reveal tracks, his, mine, and others. Someone would see them. Inside, Solomia was bundled in 3 layers of wool. Her cheeks were red, her eyes half open. She didn't cry much anymore. She seemed to understand silence had kept us alive. Marco lifted his rifle and slung it over his back. "Stay close to me," he said quietly. We began walking, the snow crunching beneath our boots, every step sinking deep. I followed him through the trees, the shadows of bare branches striping the ground like broken ribs. After an hour, I spoke. "Marco," I said, my voice low, "do you ever think about leaving all this? The uniform, the orders?" He didn't turn around. "Every day. So why don't you?" He paused, glancing back over his shoulder. "Because if men like me leave, the wrong ones stay." I thought about that as we walked. It sounded noble, but it was also tragic, like being trapped inside a burning house because someone had to hold the door open for others. By midday, the light grew harsh. The snow glittered painfully bright. My legs ached. My arms were numb from holding the baby. Marco stopped once, handed me a small piece of bread. "Eat," he said. I shook my head. "For her." He tore it in half and pressed one piece into my hand. "Then for both of you," I smiled faintly. He had that quiet stubbornness that made it impossible to argue. We rested by a fallen birch tree. Salamia stirred in her blankets, her small hand reaching for the air. Marco watched her, his expression softening in a way that made my chest ache. "She has your eyes," he said suddenly. I laughed quietly. "How would you know? You've never seen me without frostbite." He smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from him. "I just know." For a moment, it was easy to imagine another life, one where this man wasn't a soldier and I wasn't a refugee, and the world outside didn't demand that goodness be paid for in blood. Then he froze, his head snapping up. "What is it?" I whispered. He raised a hand for silence. A faint hum drifted through the air, an engine distant but growing. "Patrol," he said. His voice was calm, but I saw the tension in his jaw. "They're sweeping the valley. What do we do?" He glanced around, scanning the landscape. "Follow me." We moved off the trail, through thick clusters of pine. The snow was deeper here, swallowing our footprints quickly. My breath came in sharp bursts. My chest burned. Salamia began to whimper softly. Marco turned. "She has to stay quiet." "She's just a baby," I said, clutching her tighter. His eyes softened. "I know." He led us to a rocky outcrop half buried in snow. Beneath it, a hollow space gaped, a natural shelter formed by fallen boulders. He crouched, cleared the entrance, and motioned for me to crawl inside. I hesitated. "What about you?" "I'll cover the tracks. Go." I crawled in, pulling Salamia close. The air was thick and cold, heavy with the smell of earth. Marco moved outside, sweeping snow over our footprints with a pine branch. The engine noise grew louder. Then voices. I pressed my hand over my daughter's mouth, praying she wouldn't cry. My heart hammered so hard I thought they would hear it. The voices came closer, shouting back and forth in clipped commands. Marco's voice joined them, calm, measured, answering questions I couldn't hear. He was pretending. He was one of them again. Minutes stretched into eternity. Then footsteps stopped right outside the hollow. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness, brushing the snow just inches from my face. I held my breath. Salamia squirmed. "Please," I begged silently, "please." Then the light moved away. A sharp whistle pierced the air, followed by the sound of engines fading. I waited, frozen, until silence returned. Marco's voice came softly. "It's over." I crawled out, trembling so hard I could barely stand. "They didn't see us?" He shook his head. "No, but they know someone's out here. We have to keep moving." We walked until dusk. The wind picked up again, carrying fine crystals of snow that stung our faces. Marco walked ahead, scanning the horizon. I followed, my exhaustion turning everything into blur. When the first lights of the village appeared far in the distance, small, golden dots against the white, I thought I might collapse. "There," he said, pointing. "That's where you'll be safe." "You," I said quietly. "Not we." He didn't answer. We reached the edge of a frozen stream, the last barrier before the fields that led to the village. He stopped there, staring across. "This is where I leave you," he said softly. My throat tightened. "You can't go back." "I have to," he said. "If I disappear, they'll search. They'll come here. Then what was all this for?" He looked at me for a long time. "So that you and she can live." The air between us burned with the things we didn't say. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver pendant on a chain. Old, tarnished, worn smooth by time. "My wife gave me this," he said. "It belonged to her mother. She said it protected women who carried it." He placed it in my hand. "I can't take this," I whispered. "You can," he said. "And you must." I wanted to speak, to tell him that he had already given more than enough. But my voice failed. He leaned down, touched Solomia's forehead gently with his gloved hand. "Grow strong, little one," he murmured. Then he looked at me. "When she asks about the world, tell her there were still good men left in it." "I will." He stepped back, his boots crunching on the ice. "Go now, before the lights change, Marco." But he was already turning, already walking back into the storm. I stood there until his figure disappeared completely into the snow, swallowed by the white. Crossing the stream was harder than I expected. My legs were weak. The ice cracked beneath my weight. But the village lights pulled me forward. Each one felt like a heartbeat in the dark, calling me home to a place I'd never been. When I finally reached the other side, I turned once more. The wind was rising again. The tracks behind me were vanishing under falling snow. It was as if the earth itself wanted to keep his secret. I held the pendant tightly and whispered his name once, letting it dissolve into the night. The village was small, almost hidden against the hills. Smoke rose from chimneys. The air smelled of wood and bread. I knocked on the first door I found. An old woman answered. Her eyes widened when she saw me, my clothes torn, my face raw from wind. "Please," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "My baby." She didn't ask questions. She simply reached out, took my arm, and pulled me inside. The warmth hit me like a wave. I sank to my knees, sobbing. "Shh," the woman said gently, taking the baby from my arms. "You're safe now." Safe. The word felt too big to fit inside me. That night, I sat by the window of the small room she gave me, watching the snow fall outside. The lights of the village glowed softly through the fog. I held the pendant and the small wooden snowflake in my hands. One from the past, one from the man who'd walked back into it. And as Solomia slept beside me, I realized something I hadn't before. Salvation isn't loud. It doesn't come with angels or trumpets. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the form of footsteps turning back toward the ones the world forgot. I didn't know if Marco had survived. Maybe he had been taken. Maybe he was already gone. But I knew this. Whatever part of him the war hadn't destroyed, he had given to us. And that meant something holy still lived in the ruins. Spring came slowly, as if the earth itself was afraid to hope again. The snow melted in hesitant patches, revealing the brown, tired grass beneath. Streams ran where once there had been walls of ice. For the first time in months, the air smelled of life instead of loss. In the small mountain village that had taken me in, people began to return to their routines, mending roofs, tending goats, planting seeds in the thawing soil. I helped where I could. Some days I carried water from the well. Other days, I sat by the window of the house that had become my home, sewing clothes for the families who had lost everything. Solomia was growing fast. Her hair had begun to curl at the ends, her laughter brighter than the light that streamed through the wooden shutters. The villagers called her Sunchild. They said she brought warmth wherever she went. They didn't know she was born in the snow, between gunfire and silence. I rarely spoke about the journey that brought me here. When people asked where I came from, I only said, "Far away." Some truths were too heavy for words. But each night when I put my daughter to sleep, I told her stories, not fairy tales, but memories softened by hope. "There was once a woman," I'd whisper, "who thought she'd die alone in the snow. But the world sent her someone brave enough to turn back." And though she was too young to understand, she would smile, as if she knew that the story was ours. One afternoon, while I was hanging laundry outside, I heard the postman call my name. "Nadia, a letter for you." I froze. No one had ever written to me here. I had no family left to write, no friends who knew where I'd gone. He handed me a small, worn envelope, the edges smudged with dirt. There was no sender, no return address, only my name written in rough, uneven letters. The handwriting was unfamiliar, yet something about it made my chest tighten. I thanked him and went inside, my hands trembling. Solomia followed me, tugging at my skirt. "Mama?" "It's nothing, my love," I said softly. "Just a letter." I sat at the table and stared at it for a long time before I dared to open it. Inside, there was no long message, only a single folded page and something small wrapped in cloth. The page read, "She made it." That's all I needed to know. Keep her safe. M. My heart stopped. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The world blurred at the edges, then I unwrapped the cloth. Inside was the wooden snowflake carving, smoothed now, as if someone had carried it for months, keeping it safe like a talisman. And beneath it, a small silver badge, the kind worn on border uniforms, its surface scratched. The insignia half faded. I pressed the letter to my lips, tears falling silently. He was alive, or he had been at least long enough to send this. That night I couldn't sleep. I lit a candle and sat by the window, the snowflake in my hand. Outside, the moonlight turned the river silver again, the same river I had crossed. Half dead, clutching my newborn child. I remembered everything. The way his voice had sounded when he told me to run. The quiet strength in his eyes when he said he would go back. The world had wanted him to be a weapon, but he had chosen mercy instead. In the candlelight, Solomia stirred in her sleep. Her tiny hand fell against my arm, her warmth anchoring me back to the present. "Your father would have been proud of him," I whispered. "I think God must have sent him in his place." I placed the snowflake on the windowsill, letting the moonlight catch its edges. Weeks passed. I began volunteering at the refugee center in the next town, helping new mothers, teaching children to read. It was the only way I could repay the kindness I'd been shown. Every time a train arrived carrying tired faces and trembling hands, I saw echoes of myself. Women clutching infants, men limping from cold, children staring with hollow eyes. And every time I guided them inside, gave them blankets and soup, I thought, maybe one of them met someone who turned back too. One evening, as I was leaving the center, a small boy tugged at my sleeve. "Miss Nadia," he said shyly, holding up a folded piece of paper. "A soldier gave me this for you." My pulse jumped. "What soldier?" He pointed toward the gate. "He left already." I opened the note with shaking hands. "North Border, 7th Post. Snow falls again tomorrow." There was no signature. But I didn't need one. I didn't sleep that night. At dawn, I left Solomia with the old woman from the village and began walking. The path north was long and steep, but the thaw had made the roads easier. Birds had returned to the trees, their songs thin and uncertain. By midday, clouds gathered again, the air turning sharp. When I reached the border ridge, snow had begun to fall. The guard post stood half hidden among the pines, just a wooden structure with a flag barely hanging from its pole. I stopped a few meters away, unsure if I should go closer. Then a figure stepped out. He wore a heavy coat, the same kind as before. His face was leaner, his beard grown in. But when he looked up, I knew. "Marco," I whispered. He froze. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then he walked toward me slowly, as if afraid that if he blinked, I might vanish. When he stopped in front of me, I could see the lines around his eyes, deeper now, etched by the months of winter. "You got the letter?" he said softly. "I did." He glanced past me. "And she?" "Safe," I said. "Healthy." I smiled through my tears. "She laughs now." He nodded, his gaze dropping to the snow between us. "Good." The silence stretched. There was so much to say and none of it fit into words. "I thought you were dead," I said finally. "I almost was," he admitted. "But I couldn't die knowing I hadn't kept my promise." "Why send the snowflake?" He smiled faintly. "So you'd know mercy still exists. Even here." We stood there in the falling snow, two survivors of a story that shouldn't have had hope left in it. I wanted to reach out, to thank him, to hold his hand. But I saw the way he looked over his shoulder, the other guards inside the post, the world he still belonged to. "Go," he said quietly. "They can't see you here." "It's not safe." I nodded, tears burning my eyes. "Will I see you again?" He hesitated. "Maybe, when the snow stops falling." Then, before I could answer, he took a step back. raised his hand in a half salute, half goodbye, and turned toward the station. I watched him walk away until the snow swallowed him completely. That night, back in the village, I lit another candle by the window. Solomia was asleep beside me, her little hand curled around my finger. I held the snowflake in my palm and whispered the same words I had spoken months ago in the ruins of that first house. In a world that froze us, someone remembered to be warm. Outside, the snow fell again, soft, forgiving, and endless. But this time, it didn't feel cold. It felt like memory. It felt like mercy. It felt like home.